Smoke curled gently from the old stone chimney, carrying the scent of fading embers into the icy air. Inside, beneath a blanket of soot and ash, something small stirred, a soft flicker of life against the cold. Two golden eyes blinked open in the dim glow, reflecting the last whispers of firelight. Tiny paws pressed against the rough brick, trembling yet determined. In that quiet, a leopard cub waited, caught between warmth and the wild. If you're as amazed by this tiny leopard cub's bravery in the chimney as we are, hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you won't miss more incredible wildlife stories that show just how fragile and powerful nature can be. Every click helps us bring these real, emotional moments from the wild straight to you. The mountains lay buried under a vast expanse of white, not the gentle, picturesque snow found in postcards, but a harsh, suffocating blanket of ice that seemed to mute every sound. A storm had ripped through the valley the previous night, snapping ancient pines like fragile sticks and burying paths beneath snowdrifts taller than a man. Now, with the wind stilled, an eerie quiet pressed against the ears, heavy and unyielding. High above the winding road, a forgotten hamlet clung to the slopes, little more than a handful of timber houses. Smoke rose from only two chimneys, thin and desperate against the pale sky, while the rest lay dead, sealed by frost. It was in this frozen stillness that something stirred, small and fragile enough that even the snow seemed to hesitate before consuming it. A leopard cub, no larger than a house cat, its fur dusted with frost, whiskers quivering from exhaustion. Each paw sank into the icy crust, leaving frantic tracks as it limped across the storm-battered terrain. Its mother was gone, perhaps claimed by the avalanche that had scarred the ridge 2 nights prior. Hunger gripped its ribs like iron, every breath a ragged mist against the cold. The mountains were no place for a creature so lost, yet instinct propelled it downward, drawn by the faint scent of wood smoke and something sweet lingering in the air. At the edge of the hamlet stood a solitary cabin, steadfast against the elements. Its logs were weathered gray, windows latticed with thick frost that looked carved from stone. A single chimney jutted skyward, sending a weak curl of smoke into the still air. To the cub, it represented survival itself. The door was tightly shut, but a gap yawned beneath the eaves where ice had split the shingles. The cub's golden eyes caught the dark opening of the chimney, rimmed with soot and snow. It paused, muscles coiled between fear and need. Then with a burst of desperation, it climbed. Claws scraped against stacked firewood and the narrow ledge, reaching the chimney that now loomed like a dark throat, warm breath rising from within. Finally, the cub dove in. Inside the cabin, Ethan Ward slouched near the hearth, eyes fixed on the slow rhythm of the flames. At 46, his shoulders were broad from years of labor, though time had softened their edges. His beard, streaked with iron, curled damp from melted snow, and his storm-gray eyes flicked to the window intermittently, as though expecting something unnamed. Winter had always been tough here, but this one felt merciless. It had claimed more than trees. 2 cabins were deserted after families fled, and a boy from the next ridge had succumbed to frostbite before Christmas. Ethan stayed behind because leaving wasn't in his nature, yet the silence gnawed at him like a living thing. He didn't hear the cub at first. The storm outside murmured through the cracks like a restless ghost, and the fire hissed as resin bled from the logs. Then came the faint scrabble of claws on brick, followed by a muffled thump from the chimney shaft. Ethan straightened, listening intently. Another scuffle, louder this time, punctuated by a pitiful cry that didn't belong to any bird or rat. A chill crept down his spine. Gripping the iron poker, he edged toward the hearth, eyes fixed on the dark mouth of the chimney. Something moved inside, alive. And then, in the dim shadows, 2 eyes blinked back at him, golden and wide with terror. Ethan froze. The cabin seemed to shrink around him, the world condensing to the size of those eyes. His grip on the poker loosened as realization hit. A cub, a leopard cub, trapped in the flue. Its fur was matted with soot and frost, body trembling from cold and fear. Tiny claws scraped the brick as it struggled, but there was nowhere to escape. The chimney had become its prison. Ethan's mind raced. He had glimpsed leopards before, specters on distant slopes, vanishing at the slightest noise, but never this close. For a moment, instinct screamed at him to step back, let nature take its course. Out here, intervening could destroy a man's life. Yet a quieter, heavier voice pressed against his conscience, echoing the memory of his late wife, Mary Ann, who had once bottle-fed a dying fawn in their kitchen, saying, "Every life deserves a chance, Ethan." The cub whimpered. Something inside him snapped. Ethan set aside the poker and crouched near the hearth, heart hammering. The fire spat sparks as if warning him, but he leaned closer, feeling the heat scorch his face. The cub's eyes locked on his, wild and pleading. "How in God's name did you end up here?" he whispered. He didn't know if he was asking the cub or himself. Outside, the mountains loomed in silence, the storm plotting its next strike. Inside, a man and a creature from two different worlds stared across a river of flame and ash, their fates intertwined in the unforgiving geometry of survival. Neither knew the cost of what was about to come. Ethan had spent a lifetime learning that hesitation kills in the mountains, kills men, kills beasts, kills anything that lingers too long between two choices. And yet, here he was, kneeling by the hearth with his breath snagging in his throat, staring into a chimney that had swallowed a piece of the wild. The cub shivered violently, its paws slipping against the soot-stained bricks. Every attempt to claw upward sent a rain of ash tumbling into the fire, spitting embers like angry insects. Its mewling had softened into a rasp, the sound of something running out of time. "Easy now," Ethan murmured, though the words tasted strange in the silence. They weren't meant for a predator, not one that, given a few months, would be able to tear a man open with the grace of lightning. He grabbed the poker again, not to harm, but to wedge against the bricks, angling it as a crude step. The iron clanged softly as he pressed it upward, and the cub flinched, eyes flaring like twin moons. Ethan froze, hands steady despite the sweat sliding down his temple. "You fight me, and you'll burn," he said, voice low, reasoning with something that didn't know language. "Stay still." The cub's ribs moved like bellows under its spotted coat, pulling shallow, frantic breaths. Its tail flicked ash as it shifted its weight onto the bar, claws scrabbling for purchase. Ethan reached up, gloved hands stretching toward the small, trembling body. The heat inside the chimney was brutal, trapped like a snare. His knuckles brushed fur, damp with melted frost and soot. "Got you," he grunted, closing his hands gently around its torso. The cub panicked. It twisted, snarled, a thin, desperate sound, not yet the roar of its lineage, and raked its claws across his sleeve. The leather glove absorbed most of it, but pain bloomed sharp along his wrist where one talon found skin. Ethan hissed through his teeth but didn't let go. Instead, he hauled backward with a single, brutal pull. The chimney coughed a storm of ash as the cub came free, a limp bundle that hit his chest before sliding to the floorboards. For a moment, they both sat there, stunned. Ethan coughing black dust, the cub sprawled on its side, sides heaving like bellows. Up close, it was heartbreak made flesh. Its ears were ragged with frostbite, little crescents of dead white along the tips. Soot masked the rosettes of its coat until it looked more shadow than gold. And its eyes, those molten eyes, flicked between fear and some fragile ember of trust. Ethan's pulse thundered. What the hell was he supposed to do now? The rules were simple out here. Don't interfere with the wild unless you're ready to shoulder what follows. And this wasn't some lost dog or broken-winged crow. This was an apex predator's bloodline, and somewhere in the maze of those ridges, there was, or had been, a mother who'd die to defend it. If she was alive. If. The cub shuddered violently, breaking his spiral of thought. Cold was eating it alive, that much was clear. Its paws were raw, pink where the pads had cracked. Hunger had carved hollows under its fur, and the chimney had nearly roasted the breath out of it. Leaving it outside wasn't an option. Not if he wanted to sleep without ghosts clawing his conscience. He slid the iron grate aside and coaxed the cub closer to the fire, but not too close. It bared its teeth weakly, a whisper of defiance. Ethan respected it for that. He fetched an old wool blanket from the chair and draped it near the hearth, easing the creature onto the rough folds. Its body tensed under his hands, then sagged as exhaustion claimed what fear couldn't. From the cupboard, he pulled a tin of condensed milk, left over from autumn, and poured some into a shallow bowl. He'd seen Marion do this for orphans of the woods long ago. Warm the milk just enough to steam, mix a little water, wait. When he set it down, the cub lifted its head, nostrils twitching. Hunger won where pride failed. Its tiny tongue flicked once, twice, then it drank with a low, rumbling sound that might have been a purr or a warning. Ethan sat back on his heels, staring at the scene. A man and a leopard cub, both prisoners of the same winter, sharing firelight and silence. It should have felt like salvation. It didn't. Something about the stillness pressed too hard, too deep, as though the cabin walls were holding their breath with him. He looked at the soot-blackened chimney throat and wondered what else might crawl through if the mountains decided to spit out more ghosts. A knock shattered the quiet. Ethan's head snapped toward the door. No one came here without reason, especially not in this weather. He rose, boots heavy on the boards, and cracked it open against the bite of wind. On the stoop stood Lena Moore, her parka crusted with snow, camera slung across her chest like a talisman. Her face was raw from cold, eyes fierce as the peaks behind her. "You've got smoke thick as hell coming from your roof," she said without greeting. "You all right?" Ethan swallowed hard. Behind him, the cub made a small sound, the kind that could shatter everything if heard by the wrong ears. He blocked the doorway with his shoulders, words dragging like stones. "Fire's fine. Just keeping warm." Lena's gaze slid past him, sharp as a blade. She wasn't buying it, not entirely. And Ethan realized, with a slow, sinking weight, that secrets in a land this empty had a way of screaming louder than truth. Behind him, the cub stirred. And somewhere far beyond the cabin walls, in the labyrinth of frozen ridges, a sound rolled through the silence, low, guttural, and endless. The kind of sound that didn't belong to the wind. A mother's roar. Ethan's blood turned to ice. The roar rolled down the mountains like an avalanche of sound, muffled by the snow yet savage enough to make the window panes quiver in their frames. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, Lena's breath frosting between them. She tilted her head, her sharp blue eyes narrowing. "That wasn't the wind," she said. Ethan forced a shrug, though the hairs on his neck rose like needles. "Cougar, maybe. They roam higher this time of year." "Cougars don't sound like that," Lena replied, voice flat as the ice underfoot. Before he could answer, the cub gave a soft, guttural cry from inside the cabin. Not loud, but loud enough. Ethan felt the weight of her stare as it slid past his shoulder, drawn by instinct to the shadows beyond. He stepped aside, blocking her view, but Lena was quicker than most men he knew. She ducked past him in a flash, boots thudding against the boards, and froze near the hearth. "What the hell?" Her voice cracked, barely audible. The cub lay curled in the wool blanket, a fragile smudge of ash and gold by the firelight. Its fur glimmered where soot hadn't buried the rosettes, its eyes twin shards of molten amber. When it saw Lena, it bared its tiny teeth, a silent snarl trembling at the edges of its whiskers. Lena swung toward Ethan, fury igniting like tinder. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ethan shut the door hard, sealing out the shriek of the wind, and the truth that might come clawing through the night. He faced her square, jaw tight. "I pulled it out of the chimney. That's all. That's all." She flung a gloved hand toward the cub. "This isn't a stray cat, Ethan. It's a leopard, an endangered one, at that. Its mother is out there, and if she catches its scent here—" "I know what happens," he snapped, the words sharp enough to cut the air. Silence fell heavy between them, broken only by the hiss of the fire and the cub's soft, rhythmic breaths. Lena's anger flickered, dimmed by something heavier. Worry, maybe, or the shadow of a choice she wished she didn't have to make. "Where did you find it?" she asked finally, voice stripped of heat. "In the chimney." He sank into the chair, suddenly aware of the burn in his wrist where the cub's claws had kissed skin. Half dead, frozen. It wouldn't have lasted an hour out there. Lena crouched by the blanket, her fingers hovering inches from the cub's trembling flank. She didn't touch. It wasn't trust she lacked, but respect. Her breath softened as she studied it. God, it can't be more than 4 months old. Ethan stared at the flames, their orange tongues licking the dark like some hungry truth. "What do you want me to do? Throw it back outside?" She didn't answer. Not right away. Because that was the line, wasn't it? The one etched in blood and law. Wild stays wild. No matter what storms break the world in half. But storms didn't know rules, and neither did mercy. Finally, Lena rose, stripping off her gloves. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. It can't stay here. If the mother finds this cabin, she'll tear it apart, and you with it. We need to take it back. Now. Ethan laughed, a sound without humor. In this? He jabbed a finger toward the frost-latticed window. Outside, the night had thickened, a black wall pulsing with snow. You'll vanish before you hit the tree line. So we wait for daylight. And if daylight doesn't come before the mother does? His voice cracked like old timber. The question hung between them like a blade. The cub stirred, lifting its head, ears pricked as though the roar had stitched itself into its bones. Its gaze flicked from Ethan to Lena, then to the door, as if some ancient map had already unfolded behind its eyes. And in that moment, Ethan felt something he couldn't name, a thread pulling taut between the beast and the man, spun from ash and blood and choices that never end well. He pushed to his feet, pacing the length of the room like a caged thing. You think I don't know the risk? You think I want this? His voice was low now, tight, coiled around something raw. I didn't ask for any of it. But it's here, and it's alive because I pulled it out of that chimney. And if keeping it alive means you die? Lena shot back. Ethan stopped. The fire cracked. Shadows leapt across the walls like restless ghosts. He turned to her slowly, gray eyes hard as ice. Then maybe that's a trait I can live with. Lena stared at him, her breath shallow, her camera swinging silently against her chest like a pendulum counting down something inevitable. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. What could she say? That rules mattered more than mercy? That the wild didn't care for human grief, or guilt, or second chances? Outside, the wind shifted, and with it came another sound. Closer this time. Lower. A growl that crawled under the door and curled around their ankles like smoke. The cub went rigid. Lena's face drained of color. She reached for the rifle mounted above the hearth, her hands moving with the precision of someone who hated what she was about to do. Ethan stepped between her and the gun, voice like gravel. No. Her whisper was a blade. Ethan, no guns. Not tonight. The growl rumbled again, deep enough to shake the bones of the cabin. The mother was out there, carving circles in the snow, her hunger sharpened by fear and fire. And in the heart of that fragile wooden box, a man and a woman stood divided by firelight, between law and love, survival and surrender, while a tiny life trembled on the edge of all their choices. The night closed its jaws around the cabin. The storm was gone, but the silence that followed was worse, a suffocating stillness, broken only by the whisper of snow shifting under something heavy outside. Ethan stood by the door, his palm resting on the wood, as if he could feel the heartbeat of the wilderness through its grain. Lena crouched near the hearth, one hand on the rifle though her eyes never left the cub. It lay curled on the blanket, chest heaving, tiny ears twitching at every sound. The growl came again, closer this time, curling through the cracks like smoke. And then, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, padding circles in the snow. The boards under Ethan's boots seemed to tense. He didn't need to see her to know. She was out there, the mother. Full-grown, starving, dangerous as the hunger that drove her here. Lena rose slowly, voice a thread. If she comes through that door. She won't. You don't know that. Ethan turned. The fire painted his face in molten hues, carving deep trenches in the lines of his skin. If you shoot her, you kill more than a cat, Lena. You kill everything she's lived for, everything this little one is. And if we do nothing? Her words snapped, brittle with fear. We die for what? For some broken story about mercy? Ethan didn't answer, because the truth was crouching in the room with them. There were no good endings here, only less cruel ones. A shadow slid across the frosted window, a ripple of muscle and spots, moving like smoke. The cub whimpered, a soft cry that cracked the silence wide open. Outside, the mother answered with a snarl that rattled the glass. Lena's hands trembled on the rifle. We can't wait. Ethan's breath shuddered out. His eyes went to the cub, then to the fire, its glow licking at the black throat of the chimney. And in that instant, the shape of the ending unfolded inside him, sharp and merciless as an avalanche. He crossed the room, kneeling by the cub, its golden eyes lifted to his, wide and wet, reflecting flames like liquid suns. For a moment, Ethan saw Marianne there, not her face, but her voice, soft and stubborn. Every life deserves a chance. He scooped the cub into his arms. It writhed weakly, claws snagging his coat, but he held it close, feeling the fragile hammer of its heart against his ribs. He turned to Lena, who stared like she was watching someone walk into their own grave. "Open the back hatch," he said. "No. Ethan, no. Do it." His tone left no room for argument. She hesitated, then moved, boots thudding to the rear door that opened into the lean-to. Snow knifed in when she cracked it, glittering under a hard moon. The mountains loomed like beasts carved from bone, their shadows swallowing the world whole. Ethan stepped onto the threshold, the cold tearing at his lungs. The mother was there, 20 yards out, a silhouette of muscle and rage, tail lashing like a whip. Her eyes burned like coals in the dark. Ethan raised a hand, palm out, the universal gesture of surrender. "Easy, girl," he murmured, though his voice was barely a ghost in the wind. She answered with a roar that seemed to split the night. Snow plumed around her paws as she advanced, slow, lethal, the sound of her breath a furnace in the stillness. Behind him, Lena's whisper cracked like ice. "Ethan, don't." But he was already moving. Down the steps, boots sinking deep, the cub a trembling weight against his chest. He could feel the heat of her stare, the promise in it. One wrong move, and you're meat. He stopped 10 feet from her, the fire's glow bleeding weakly through the doorway behind him. The mother prowled closer, head low, shoulders rolling like thunder under her skin. Ethan crouched, snow biting through his jeans, and set the cub gently on the ground. It mewed, a tiny, broken sound, and stumbled toward the looming shadow. The mother froze, nostrils flaring, then surged forward with a guttural growl that shook the marrow in his bones. For a heartbeat, Ethan thought she'd leapt against the walls, long and wild, as if mocking the frail order men tried to carve from a world that never belonged to them. And outside, from somewhere deep in the black marrow of the forest, came a sound that hollowed the night to bone, a mother's scream, raw and endless, ripping through the silence until it wasn't a sound anymore. It was a wound. Ethan closed his eyes. In the red wash of his lids, the flames spoke their last.